wonderful to be with you all this evening. Thank you for giving me the gift of your time. And Lisa and Maylin, thank you for that wonderful, very generous introduction. I will tell you, I think, Maylin, your husband got probably better because he married you, not so much the Toastmasters. They always say behind a successful man is a wonderful woman telling him he's wrong. So that's fantastic. So all the best and congratulations to you. Lisa, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is wonderful to be with you all this evening. I know everybody's had a wonderful week. Hopefully you're enjoying a little bit of the cooler weather here in Dallas. And it's a real treat for us to get a little bit of taste of fall before we maybe get a little bit more summer, and then the beautiful season will begin. As you heard a little bit, I've been around the airline business a little bit. Over the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of working with a few different organizations. My career path as such would not be anywhere as linear as what would have been described there. If you asked me 20 years ago, would I be sitting in the role I'm sitting in today, overseeing our team that supports our compensation and benefits for over 130,000 employees around the world, I would have told you I would have never imagined it. I started off as a customer service and gate agent at the airport in Phoenix and Sky Harbor with a little airline called America West, which later became American. And it's been the privilege of my career to be able to see the airline both from within and outside, and also from really everywhere from the bag room to the boardroom of being able to see an airline work. So as we go through, I always get a lot of different questions about what's it like working for an airline, or what about this time my bag got lost, or this time, you charged me a fee for so ticket. Happy to talk about any and all of those as we go through. But this evening, I want to spend a little bit of time with you all, as all of you have probably seen, and you've seen the title, around the work of leadership. So let's dive right in there. I'm going to try and share my screen here, and so we'll get rolling as we get going this evening. So before we get going, I want you to think about this for just a moment. And if you have your chat screen available, and I don't know, Lisa will be taking a look at this, I want you to take advantage of that, because I want to ask you this, which is, if someone could ask you one question that could help you have a better day today, what would that question be? If someone could ask you just one question to help you have a better day today, what would that question be? If you could go ahead and just chat that in, type it into your chat window. And Lisa, if you're seeing it, if you wouldn't mind just reading out kind of the things that you're seeing. We'll give you a couple seconds as you type that in.
Yeah, we're seeing, do you need help? Anything I can help you with? How can I serve you? Is there something I can help you with?
When can you start with us?
When can you start with us?
Yeah.
Are you living in present, in memory, or in imagination? How's your day? Yeah.
Yeah, so we see a lot of themes in here, and keep these coming. And as you kind of hear, or as you kind of like imagine, just think about this question. I love this question Ron just asked. What would you do if you couldn't fail? Imagine the answers that you would sometimes get to that. How may I help you? How's your day? How are you today? I want you to think about this particular aspect, about if someone could ask you one question that could help you have a better day today, what would that question be? And I want to take just a moment and a couple of things to show you a couple of people that may not be having a great day today. Let's take a look. Somebody that's not having a great day after the work that they've done. Probably somebody that didn't attend PMI being able to see this. Here's another one. You'll see these on your screen. You probably recognize them. You're like, hey, wait a second. I actually worked with somebody who did something like that the other day. And then my personal favorite, that you see somebody like this. These are examples that I'm certain we have seen, we've experienced, we've looked at, and we have seen all through our careers, whether there are moments, there are days that you and I have felt this way, or maybe you've worked with individuals that have shown up this way. Not my job to move the tree. It's nowhere there in my responsibilities. I don't see it on my chart. That's somebody else's job. I'm just going to go through and be able to do that. And we'll often see these kinds of images and, you know, you'll have the same reaction I did. We'll laugh. We'll be like, wow, that's awful, or that's terrible, or thereabouts. But I often wonder, and I ask myself the question, what if somebody asked these individuals, these three individuals that you see here today, what if they asked them one of those questions that each of you were asking? How are you doing? What's on your mind? Is something bothering you? I know when I've done this in different sessions, somebody will inevitably ask the question. I'm sure it's probably there in the chat window. Do you have tonight's winning lottery numbers? Right? I'm sure if you had those numbers, your day would be a lot better, and probably the days after that. But so often, if you think about it, today, for those of you who were going into the office, or for those of you who were ending a day, if you think about the one question that any individual gets asked, you pick up the phone on your drive home from work, or you leave your home office and you finally go into your kitchen and your loved one is there, your spouse is there, or you're calling your mom or your dad, what's the first question they ask you? How was your day? How was your day? It's a question that gets asked millions and millions of times all across the world. And even in this meeting today, somebody today will ask you, how was your day? Somebody in about an hour's time will ask you, how was your day? And hopefully by the end of it, you'll say, hey, you know what? I learned a little something. Or, you know, hey, I got even better at multitasking this evening, listening to this guy talk on for a few minutes. Hopefully that won't be the case, but you'll have it work to be able to do that. When I think about this idea of somebody asking this question, how was your day? I often think about the work of leadership. Because when I think about the answer to that question, when I think about the way that it shows up in so many different ways, it is fundamentally the responsibility of the leader to influence that question. If you think about who has the most influence to affect what that answer actually looks like, it's the leader. It's that supervisor, that individual who either or not makes a positive influence for that person to say, you know what, I had the worst day today. My goodness, my manager was just micromanaging me. You know, I got, sent on a task in the morning, and then by the afternoon it had changed because nobody was sure about what they were doing. Or the individual says, you know what, I had an incredible day today. I had one of the most amazing conversations with my leader. My leader asked me, hey, what do you think about this? It's been a question nobody asked me before, but Lisa came to me and asked me, what do you think about this? And I talked to them and they were amazed. They were like, that's exactly what we wanted to hear. And I felt really good hearing that. The ability to influence that becomes the work of leadership. And we'll talk about that here as we go through for a little bit this evening. I want to talk about the idea of what does leadership look like? Leadership is not a role, it is not a title. This is one of my fundamental beliefs about leadership. When I think about the work that is there, the work that is available for us to be able to do. There is no greater responsibility that a leader has than recognizing that it is not about a title, it is not about a role, it is about a mindset. For those of you who have joined the discussion here this evening, you may not have a title that says manager, supervisor, project manager, vice president, president, CEO. You may have that. I can tell you over the course of my career in the various organizations that I've been in, I have seen more leadership from individuals who have no title than those who have the longest name on a business card. It is fundamentally about a mindset. It is about how you show up every single day, and the decisions and the way in which you are willing to show up for your team. Many of you know this gentleman. This gentleman, Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the most famous generals, one of the most famous military generals in all of history, has, I believe, one of the best definitions of leadership that I've ever seen. It is one that encompasses the complexity, but it also encompasses the art that is there in leadership. And it comes down to this very simple and fundamental truth. A leader's role is to define reality and then give hope. You can see very often in leadership, there are individuals that are able to do one and not the other. You can be the individual that is always giving hope, right? The individual that is ultra positive, that is, never a cloud is in the sky kind of thing. They are always the ones that will show up and be able to say, you know what, all of these things are great. But you look outside and you see, wait a second, everything is burning. What is going on? You have the other side, which is leaders who are like, there's nothing that can go right. These are the folks that, for those of you who are Winnie the Pooh fans, this is what Eeyore looks like. These are the people who there is no way that they will ever be happy about something. You and I, we've worked for leaders like that. The role of leadership, the work that leadership does ultimately comes to these two very distinct yet important things that a leader must continuously balance, which is, how do you define reality? How do you lay out the case for the truth that is there and yet be able to give hope, to be able to rally the troops, as it were, to be able to rally and be able to go forward? That's what we're going to be talking about. A leader that defines reality and gives hope leads to what I believe is the definition of leadership that I try to live out every single day, is this idea of shaping and sustaining an environment that makes best days possible. Go back to that question, how was your day? And it's not just, great, here's a day with balloons and confetti, or somebody got me a free lunch. But it's that day where an individual with their God-given ability comes into work knowing that today I've been able to do my job to the best of my ability because I've been in an environment that encourages that. I've been in an environment that promotes that builds that up, because a leader is there supporting me and being able to do that. This fundamentally, dear friends, is what the work of leadership is about. You can put everything else aside. Many of you have heard a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek and others who have talked about this idea that, your job as a leader is not to be responsible for the work. Yes, you are responsible for the work, but you are responsible for those who do the work. When you understand that, when you see that, when you as a leader are able to appreciate this important truth, your job is to create the environment. Your job is to create the environment in which the team can work. And this is what we're going to talk about. When I think about how do leaders go create this environment, how does the work of leadership ultimately come through, I believe it comes down to one thing that is really important: clarity. Now, you may be listening to that and you may say, clarity, can you be a little more clear about that? Well, I will. There are three elements, and it goes back to what Lisa was talking about, three questions that I believe are really important for leaders to ask themselves every day, every single day in the work of leadership. It is clarity, number one, about purpose. It is clarity about role, and it is clarity about responsibility. These are the things that are fundamental in the work of leadership that we'll be spending the next few minutes digging into each of these for us to be able to learn and be able to see a little bit. So let's start with purpose. When we think about clarity of purpose, The first question, if you're jotting anything down or you're taking notes, here's the first question that I believe any leader and every leader should be asking themselves every day. First question, why do you lead? Why do you lead? I'd be curious, why do you lead? Go ahead and use the chat window and type in just a short sentence, 3 or 4 words. Why do you lead? Coach, mentor, serving others, to make a difference, to help the organization reach its goals, to help a group achieve their goals. Servant leader, I like helping others, to drive change, to help the team be successful, help people develop. I lead to support others to be successful, to make a difference, to be a good role model. These are incredible ways in which leaders show up and as to why you lead. There are, unfortunately, and you and I have been experiences of that, which is there are leaders who are like, well, I lead because I got a better office, or I got a slightly bigger paycheck, or I got a slightly better parking spot, or they just told me I have to do it. My friend, this evening, if any one of those, and those might seem trite, but if any one of those, if you ask yourself, why do you lead? Because let's be clear, leadership is difficult. Nobody says, look, let me just take on all of these people that I have to support, be responsible for them, go listen to them, go give them feedback, give them all of the resources that they need, be able to listen to them when things aren't going well, recognize them when things are. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the day, I leave to go home only to realize I still have my work that I have to do in order for my team to continue to be successful. Why lead? For so many, it's unfortunately just the next step on the journey. But for so many of you, I'm encouraged to hear these things and read these things, like being able to create a successful project, to set a good example, to get the job done, to help others be successful. Those are the things that become so important to think about this question, why do you lead? Because I can tell you, friend, why you lead shows up every day in how you lead. Why you lead, I'm going to say this again, shows up every day in how you lead. If you think to the leaders that you have had a privilege to work with over the course of your career, and maybe some of you are also thinking about looking in the mirror and you're saying, there's the best leader that I've ever worked with. That's fine. That's great. But if you think about those leaders that you've worked with, I can promise you, you put everything else aside, the thing that will be crystal clear for you as to what made them effective, what made them somebody that you wanted to follow, that you were like, look, I'll go anywhere with you, even if it's out of curiosity, right? As Colin Powell once said, but you will follow them anywhere. That's an incredible testament to the way that a leader leads. And I promise you, when you look into it, you will find they answered this question rigorously. They had a very clear sense of purpose. One of those things where no matter what was happening in the world around them, no matter what was happening in the situations around them, they knew. They knew without a shadow of a doubt why they showed up every day. And it showed up in how they would lead you. It shows up in how you lead your teams. Unfortunately, the flip is also true. Those individuals who are uncertain, those individuals who are thrust into that role, you will look and you will say, you know what? It shows. And so my ask to you this evening is, as you think about your role as a leader, some of us are given that privilege to be able to think about it, whether it is large teams, small teams, however the span of care sits in your organization. You are given this responsibility to be able to go take care of a group of individuals. Why do you lead? Why do you show up every day to do this work? And I hope that you are certain about that answer. First question in the work of leadership, when we think about the clarity of purpose, the first question, why do you lead? The second thing, as we dive into and as we think about the clarity of role, the clarity of role. This isn't about looking at a job description, my friend. It's the clarity of what you do. When we said that the why you lead shows up in how you lead, so the why is there, the role starts to talk about the how you lead. Here's the second question. First question, why do you lead? Second question, what walks into the room when you do? What walks into the room when you do? Have you ever thought of that question? If somebody were to answer that question on your behalf, what walks into the room when you do? When you think about this, you will automatically think about the converse. I know I have, maybe some of you have had this experience as well, where there are leaders who, when you're sitting in a room, everybody's talking, everybody's chatting, and this leader walks into the room and they haven't said a word. Everybody silences. Everybody goes quiet. All of a sudden, everybody's a very different person. Have you been there? You know exactly what I'm talking about. They haven't said a word, but somehow they have managed to suck the oxygen out of the room just by virtue of walking into the room. And now all of a sudden, everybody's a little bit more nervous. And I'm not talking about just somebody because they're a much more senior executive or whatever the case may be. I'm talking about just, your day-to-day project manager, your leader that's there. But just all of a sudden, all of the associates suddenly went quiet. What walks into the room when you do? Even those individuals who, when you are going into a meeting with them, when you are going into a discussion, and you have seen very often, well, nothing matters until they start talking. And ultimately, they are the ones who usually will talk first. And nobody else's opinion really matters. I love this idea of when we think about what does the role of a leader look like. I love what a wonderful lady by the name of Carla Harris. She is one of the chairwomen of JP Morgan, an incredible leader, with some incredible work that's out there. She talks about leadership as being the journey from execution to empowerment. This is such an important concept. When I used to help lead our training programs at American and in other organizations, I used to love when I got to be faculty for our new leader programs. So this is the first time when somebody moves from being an individual contributor to being a leader of people. And you will often find what we do in organizations is, if you are really good at something, you are the best financial analyst, you are the best kind of project manager, you are the best kind of analyst that comes in terms of benefits packages or whatever else it is. What we as organizations do is we say, great, well done, we're going to promote you and we're going to make you a leader. And so what often ends up happening is, as leaders, what individuals then do is, well, what got me here, what made me successful was doing this thing really well. And so now, in order to be successful, I've just got to keep doing this thing more and more and more and more. And what you don't realize, going back to this idea of creating an environment, is those leaders who have a very clear sense of purpose and now who have a very clear sense of role, that they understand that no longer is their responsibility to do the work. You know, the way I do it when I talk to, kind of people in finance or other people who are familiar with Excel is your job is no longer to press F9 on the Excel spreadsheet to go run the model. For those of you who are modeling nerds like me, you will appreciate that. It is not about hitting F9 on the keyboard. Your job, as it says here, your role is moving from execution, doing the work, to empowerment. How do you support those who are doing it? Those leaders who understand that role lead in a very different way than those who believe that in order for me to be successful, I need to show myself better than everybody else. I love also what this statement says from Lou Holtz, who talks about this idea that I never learn anything talking. I only learn things when I ask questions. Think about the last time you were in a discussion leading your team where look at the balance between talking, asserting versus inquiry. You would be amazed when you go in to discuss or to talk. Sometimes there are those leaders who are like, yeah, I don't need to see any of this. I have a point of view. Let me just tell you. As opposed to leaders who look at the work that you have done, and they're not asserting a point of view. They're asking questions. Who does the more talking? It's the team. It's you. And so when you look at the work of leadership, when I think about the clarity of role, this becomes so important. This becomes so important. I found in the course of my career, I'll be the first one to tell you, this is one where I've had a lot of learning to do. And I realized this is not something that comes easily, because very often if you're faced with a problem, if you're faced with a challenge, well, guess what? You have a point of view on it, or you have a way in which you think we should go solve it. That's great. But I have to deliberately remind myself that's not my role anymore. My role, and oftentimes I've even found over the course of my career, especially over the last few years, I've had to take on roles where I am no longer the functional expert. There are people on my teams who will forget more than I will ever learn about a particular topic. And so the way that I can add value, the way that I can lead is through the act of inquiry, through the ability to be able to ask questions, to be able to ask, are we connecting these things to these pieces? I heard this yesterday from this group. How does our work connect or support this area? I heard that we want to go achieve this. How does the work we are doing here help us meet the timelines to be able to support David in that work that he's doing there? That's where and how I learn and how I can help guide the team to the work that they have to do. I don't need the team to be coming in here and saying, well, what does Thomas think? Well, let's just listen to him and let's go execute. My job as a leader, your job as a leader, if you are clear in purpose and clear in role, is to be able to understand why you lead and then what is in the room when you are there as well. Oftentimes, I love this quote by Tolstoy, who looks at written so many years ago, but is absolutely true even today. I won't read it all. You see it on the screen and you can read it and you can understand it. But so often when you see examples of poor leadership, leaders will say, look, I want to step away. I want to give them the space to be able to do the work they do. But then what ends up happening is they do everything except just get off my back. How many times do we hear sometimes leaders say, look, just if you would get off my back, I could actually do this. I could actually be there and I could actually do this work. You don't need to inflict leadership on me, on my teams. When you understand the role that you play, I promise you, the dynamic that is there in your teams changes dramatically. And you know this. You have worked for leaders that understand their role to support, to guide, to encourage, to empower you. And the freedom that comes with your ability to be able to do that is refreshing. It's as refreshing as the air that is there when you walk out in Dallas this evening and after the rains and you feel, the sense of the crisp air. Here's the thing that I often talk about with poor leadership and this idea of what walks into the room when you do. Bad leadership is very much like carbon monoxide. Many of you, all of you know carbon monoxide, invisible but deadly. You can smell it, you can never really see it, you can smell it, and you know its effects. Oh, my friend, bad leadership is just like carbon monoxide. The teams that struggle under bad leaders, sometimes you walk by them in those conference rooms and you see them through the glass wall and you're like, I'm glad I'm not on that team. Or you see people walking by and you're pleading out to them saying, please help, save me from this person. Because you're trapped in that carbon monoxide of that poor leadership. But for you as a leader and for people on your teams, what do they say when you walk in the room? Why do you lead? What walks into the room when you do? Our last area that we'll talk about when we think about the work of leadership, we've talked about clarity of role, we've talked about clarity of purpose, and the third one comes to the clarity of responsibility. When we think about the clarity of responsibility, the question that we must ask, first we ask, why do you lead? Second, we ask, what walks into the room when you do? The third question I would ask every individual here to ask yourself every day, what keeps you relevant? What keeps you relevant? Why should you be here? You specifically, why should you be in the role that you're in? Go ahead, chat in a couple of responses here. I'd love to hear what you would answer. What keeps you relevant? Awareness. Thank you, John. That's a great one. Being able to understand what are the things that are happening around you. Keeping you relevant as a role model. You're always looking for a way to make your team and your processes better. A passion to learn and teach. That keeps you incredibly relevant. I love what Valerie just shared. Learning from others, watching and listening, even when you're in a meeting. Remember, the less you talk, the more you're listening, the more you're watching. Continually learning, curiosity, openness, the people who depend on me. All of those items start to become so important when you think about what keeps you relevant. I'll share with you 3 things that I have found that keep me relevant. Here they are. My 3 boys. So my guys are about 7.5 years old. I have a 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. Yes, we have a very busy household with these 3 guys, and it's the reason why I'm losing my hair and whatever I have left is turning gray, so you can feel sorry for me. And yes, I know what some of you are thinking. Yes, they all look like their mom, so we're very lucky in that way. But these are the 3 that I would argue keep me relevant, because here's a fact that is incredibly important for us to consider. My boys, when they turn 18 and when they get ready to go to college, when they are getting ready to graduate, they will be starting jobs that haven't even been invented yet. And quite frankly, will not even be invented for another 10 years. And so my wife and I, we will often have conversations around how do we make sure, because I'll tell you, for her and I growing up, it was easy. I can tell any of you, for those of you who come from my heritage background from India, the choices were pretty easy. You were either going to be a doctor or you were going to be an engineer. I was neither. So I am the black sheep in my family, quite literally. My mother still asks me the question, is it too late for me to go to medical school? That was the way it was. The world is changing so dramatically fast when it comes to that. My boys will be very likely doing jobs that don't even exist. So how do we make sure that they are staying relevant, that they are building the capabilities that are needed? How do you stay relevant in the world that we are in, where the world is moving so fast? The clock speed is so incredibly fast that we don't even have the opportunity to catch our breath and see how things are changing. I love what Alvin Toffler, a phenomenal futurist and an author, many of you, I hope, have seen this. If you are seeing it for the first time, I would beg you, write it down and remind yourself of it. Illiteracy in the 21st century, many of us have seen it in the 20th century. It was about the difference about being able to read or not read. Well, illiteracy in the century we are in now isn't about reading and writing. It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning. I hope some of you, I haven't had a chance to go back to the chat, but I hope where somebody asked you the question, what keeps you relevant? If you thought of nothing else, I hope you put PMI Dallas in there. Because the fact of you being here, if you're attending Toastmasters, if you're attending PMI, to be able to understand and to know, here's what's keeping me relevant. When people are asking me, what skills am I developing? What languages am I learning? What capabilities am I building to be more effective? This is what keeps you relevant. People in the past used to rely on their job security in the sense that, and especially I will tell you now in the world that I'm in benefits and compensation, right? How people kept their job security was, my job is to make this as complicated and as difficult for you to understand so that you need me. You need me in my job to explain these plans and to explain the ins and outs of these things to be able to go do that. What job security in the past was around, they who held the knowledge held power. Today, when you think about Google and you think about the availability of information that's there on the internet, knowledge is democratized. You don't have to be in an Ivy League institution to have access to the best knowledge, the best capabilities, the best training that is there. In fact, no longer is an undergraduate degree the sure marker of success, something that you and I, many of us in this room today, have grown up knowing that this was the marker that was there. It's not. We're moving to a skills-based environment where those jobs that are going to be more important, you think about the jobs that did not even exist 10 years ago. We're in 2020. The jobs that did not exist 10 years ago. Think of an app developer. Think of an Uber driver. Think of a machine learning specialist. Think of a coder that is there on Python. Languages that didn't even exist 10 years ago today are some of the most in-demand roles and experiences that are out there. And so when you think about your ability to stay relevant, it is not just because nobody else wants to do my job, but it's about, what are you investing in yourself? What are you truly learning to be able to grow, to be able to develop? What is the thing that often gets in our way? We all know it. We all accept it. We will all tell ourselves that same thing. What is the thing that often stands in our way from doing it? Time. Time. Or the lack thereof. And we will always say, you know what? I have no idea whether I can have the time to do that. Or there were so many other things that I needed to do this Thursday evening. I don't have time to join this PMI meeting. I don't want to listen to this guy. I don't want to listen to all of those other programs that are going on. My friend, this evening, my urge to you as you ask yourself this question, what keeps you relevant, is to understand the difference between competing versus completing. Oftentimes, we look at learning and the ability to build a skill as competing with something else that I have to do. There's always something I could be doing. But if you think about the mindset shift that is there, that it's no longer competing for my time, but rather me helping to develop the skill helps me complete the work that I have to do. It doesn't compete with it. And if you take that mindset to be able to know that, look, this is not competing for my time, it's actually helping me complete something. My ask is please, please, please do not let busy get in the way of important. Do not let busy get in the way of important. The time that you are investing here with PMI, the time that you are investing with your colleagues all around the city here, and in some cases, maybe even from around the country. There are so many things you could be doing. You could be looking at the next series of Netflix that's coming out. You could be reading that book that you've always wanted to do. There's that exercise class that you wanted to participate. All great, all good. But where are you setting out the side, and where are you setting out the time for you to stay relevant, to be able to grow in that? 3 questions. Why do you lead? What walks into the room when you do? What keeps you relevant? 3 questions that I believe are incredibly important when it comes to this idea of the work of leadership. The work of leadership to shape and sustain an environment that makes best days possible. This is why you and I do what we do every single day. When we have the opportunity to be able to get up, be able to do the things that have to happen, this is the responsibility that we have. As I wrap this up, and then I'd love to open it up for any questions as you have, or things that you want to talk about for the few minutes that we have left. I want to end with a story that I hope will bring together the things that we've been talking about, especially as we think about the work of leadership. Many of you will recognize what this picture is. It is San Francisco, and the year is 1934. The Golden Gate Bridge, one of the most famous landmarks in the United States and certainly even in the world, is under construction. This was the first time that an artifact like this has ever been built anywhere in the world, a suspension bridge that is not only this wide, but this high off of the base of the sea floor to be able to build this. An incredibly complex task that was taken on by an engineer by the name of Joseph Strauss. Here was a glaring fact that was a truth for any project that would exist during this period of time, for any major construction project that used to exist in this period of time. For every $1 million of cost, there would be 1 fatality for the project. That was the statistic that all project managers who used to work in this, so all of you, right? Those of you with that project management experience, this was what you factored into the model. That for every $1 million of cost, there would be 1 fatality for the project. The Golden Gate Bridge cost about $30 million back in 1933. If you inflation adjusted that, that would be about just under $2 billion today. For a project that was $30 million in cost, you were expecting fatalities of 30 people. Now, 30 people dying on a project, that's certainly not a project that any of us would want to be associated with. But it was an understanding. Because 1933 in the United States, what's going on? The Great Depression. Nearly 1 out of every 4 people are out of a job. 25% unemployment or even more, right? So you have people that are lining up to find a job, even at the most dangerous ones, whether it's building a bridge, building a skyscraper. In fact, those people that are lining up, what are they hoping for? I hope that guy falls and he's gone, right? Because that gives me a chance to get a job. As horrible as that is, that's the mindset that's there. And even companies, most construction companies during this time, they're basically like, look, we don't need to care about this because we can get another person off the street. Joseph Strauss, the engineer that was in charge of this project, he had a completely different mindset and a completely different view. Strauss's view was that the statistic of 1 death for every $1 million in cost, yes, I understand it exists, but it is not going to happen on my watch. It is not going to happen on my project. And so he fought and he fought to introduce a number of safety elements that were actually never there in construction projects up until that point. In fact, he instituted a project for about $150,000, which at the time people said, you're crazy for wanting to spend that. Mind you, the cost of the project entirely was $30 million. So $150,000, while it may seem little to us now, in those dollars, it was a lot of money. What he did was he built a system that spanned the length of the bridge and went on either side of the construction as well, that looked like this. It was a system of nets that was there all over the bridge. This was a system that he developed and devised that allowed these workers that as they were working, very often these projects would be behind schedule and over budget, because guess what? If you were walking on this and there was nothing below you, you fell straight into the San Francisco harbor, which most times of the year is frigidly cold, and you probably had a few seconds before you perished. When Joseph Strauss put this in, over 19 people were saved because they would walk and something happened and they would fall and they were caught by this. Those 19 people's lives were saved. This is where we actually get the term safety net from. It was this edifice, it was this artifact that came in. And in fact, one of the things that they found was the project actually got done faster. Why? Because all of a sudden now, if you were walking on that beam that you can see on your screen, you're no longer worried about falling because you know something's there to hold you. And so what they actually found was the project went faster because they actually put this, they made the investment of this $150,000 to create the safety net, and the project went faster. Over the course of the project, unfortunately, there were still fatalities, but only 11 people died, rather than what should have been 30. And in fact, 10 of those 11 people died when, unfortunately, a piece of scaffolding fell into the net and took it down. Put that in comparison. The Hoover Dam was built around the same time, didn't have any of these features, at a cost of about $50 million, and over 100 people perished in that work. If you think about the work of leadership, I see this picture. Your team, you, are the ones that are walking on that beam every single day. You're going back and forth and trying to run as fast as you can to go deliver the things that you need to go do. The work of leadership is coming underneath you to be able to support you. I loved that question that was there that we asked right at the outset, that one of you asked, what would you do if you couldn't fail? Isn't that the work of a leader? To help you understand that, look, this isn't about falling, or this isn't about failing. I am here to support you. I am here to catch you if you fall, because I understand why I lead. I know the role I play, and I know my responsibility to be here to support you. This, my friend, is the work of leadership. This is what you and I get to do every single day. There are so many people that are counting on us every day for being able to show up in this way. I hope that as you think about the work of leadership now, that as you go through, that you will take a very different view to what it means to be in the position you are in. Leadership is a privilege. Leadership is not a title. It is not a role. It is a responsibility, and it is a mindset. And I hope that as you think about this, as you ask these three questions every single day, why do you lead? That you are crystal clear about the purposes in which you show up. What walks into the room when you do? I'd encourage you, find a friend, somebody you trust, somebody who's willing to really tell you the truth, and ask them this question. I might even ask your spouse, ask your children, what walks into the room when I do? And it'll be interesting when we even talked about this idea of awareness, about spatial awareness and situational awareness that comes in. What walks into the room when you do? And this third question that is so important, it's that idea of growth. What keeps you relevant? And I hope that you will take an opportunity like it is with this brotherhood, this sisterhood of incredible professionals, that you invest in it, that you pour more into it. You will get out of it exactly what you put into it. I hope that you will take the opportunity to invest in it and to invest in yourself, and to make sure that you are continuing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. The work of leadership is a privilege that we all have. And it's a privilege that I am grateful to share with you. I am grateful for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I hope you learned a little something. And if for nothing else, tomorrow, to try a little differently in how you show up in the work of leadership. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening. Thank you for your commitment to spending the time here. And I'd love to take a few questions just as we wrap up this evening. So Lisa, back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. It was a very thought-provoking 1 hour at the presentation to keep us thinking ourselves, to reflect. A couple questions. The first one is, what was your biggest career challenge from where you were to where you are now? How did you overcome it?
So, gosh, I think we only have about 14 minutes left, so I'd have to spend the whole rest of the evening talking about some of the challenges that are there. I would tell you, let me talk about this one. One of the biggest challenges I faced was around building trust with one of my clients. As Lisa mentioned in one of my experiences, I spent 6 years with a consulting firm. Some of you may know, McKinsey & Company. I did aviation projects in all different parts of the globe. And in this one project that I was in, I remember I was a relatively junior associate consultant. And I realized so quickly the importance of being able to build trust, because unfortunately, we were in a very contentious situation. It was a very difficult client. The client really, it was a situation where the client really did not want us there. We were there kind of against what they wanted us to do. And this, in one of the meetings, the client I was working with basically accused me of falsifying the data that they had given me and misrepresenting the data that was there for them. My whole team knew, we had worked in it together. They knew that this wasn't the issue, but this was a shock that came in to be able to say, you know what, we don't trust the number, we don't know the piece that's there. That hurt. That genuinely hurt. And I realized then how important it was that the relationships that you build, even with the people around you, become so important. And I realized that, as difficult as that situation was, over time, like we were there for even longer, over time, spending time with that individual, not retaliating, not going back, but now being able to say, look, what put them in that position? And I actually realized it was because that individual was in fear. They were operating in fear. They were afraid of their job. And therefore, they were using it as a defense mechanism to lash out against me. We've all been there. It's easy to blame the consultant, when you don't want to take responsibility for something. That was an incredibly difficult challenge, and something that I feel that helped me learn a lot about relationships, and something that I've carried with me all these years since.
Thank you. The next one. During this challenging time at AA, with announcements of layoffs of thousands of employees, how do you plan to lead this change?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is an incredibly challenging time, as any of you who've been following the airline business can understand. You try to take a business that has lost, virtually 95% of its revenues, but yet has almost 100% of its costs. We've done a lot of work to reduce it, but with a lot of, our costs being not just in airplanes, but being in people and the work that's there. It's an incredibly difficult situation. In fact, we will, October 1, should there be no further action from the government to support the industry as a whole, not just American, but the industry as a whole, because we believe the airline industry is vital to get the economy going again. Driving is great, Zoom is great, but only for so long, right? The PMI, I know everybody misses the dinners, and you want to get back together. You want to be in people's spaces. That's vital for us. This is good. I have a lot of friends that, are working at Zoom and run the business, and, I'm like, hey, this is good, but there's nothing like the touch that's there. So if the government doesn't step in and do something, October 1st, over 40,000 people will be in a position where they will no longer be employed with the airline. That's a staggering reduction. Our hope, our desire is, off that group, a number of them will be on furlough. What that means is if the business starts picking up, when the business starts picking up, we get to recall them on the basis of seniority. But I will tell you, the two biggest things that we will plan to lead through this, number one is compassion. We have to understand that in a time like this, we have to be compassionate. So one thing that I'm incredibly proud of our team in this environment, for those 30 or so thousand people that are affected by this out of the 40,000, because there's a group of people who voluntarily taken a leave, they are sacrificing really their careers to go. But for those 30,000 people who through no choice of their own are really in the situation, every single one of them received a phone call telling them about what the situation is. When I think about compassion, unfortunately, I've been in this business a long time, and there are others of you, I'm certain, on the call who've been in it even longer. There used to be a day in which that notice was given to you via a message or a piece of paper or something cold and impersonal. We had over 8,000 of our flight attendants who are going to be affected by this. Every single one of them was contacted by their flight service manager to let them know how sorry they were, how disappointed they were in what was happening, and the desire that they would come back as quickly as possible. So I think being able to lead with compassion is incredibly important. The second one is around leading with creativity. In a time of uncertainty, which the world we're in today, right? Nobody knows when this virus is going to subside. Nobody knows When are we going to get to the other side of it? When are people going to fly again? In a time of uncertainty, flexibility is the ultimate winning card. So you have to be flexible. You have to adapt your business model to be able to adjust. It's the reason why when all of a sudden we realize, look, there are no passengers coming on our airplanes, and yet we have 700 airplanes sitting around, so incredibly proud of our cargo team. They decided, they figured, you know what? We're going to go fly all cargo airplanes so that we can go move goods. People aren't moving, but goods still need to move. All of that PPE, the personal protective equipment, all of the ventilators, all of the things that needed to happen, needed a way to get from point A to point B quickly. And so we've adapted the business model in that way, and then in other ways to be able to do it. So I think importantly, through compassion, these are difficult times. Like even for people that are working from home, being able to understand, I love what the Canadian government put out at the early onset of this. People aren't working from home. They are at home working. And so, there's a big difference in that. And so understanding that the life that is around you and being able to recognize, look, if my son walks through the door when I'm on a call, or if you hear him screaming in the background, that's okay. None of us chose to be in this environment. So how do we act in a compassionate way to do that?
Yeah, very good. Next one, what strategies can a leader employ when those higher up the food chain are leadership challenged? Any thoughts on how to lead upwards?
So that's a very nicely put way about those that are sometimes more senior, that are leadership challenged. Look, that is of course the reality that a number of individuals deal with, which is, whenever I do talks like this or have an opportunity to meet with folks, everybody's like, hey, look, I'm doing this well, but my boss isn't, or those around me aren't. So how do I do this? So a couple of different ways. One is I always encourage people to build the relationship. Here's the piece that's there, and you may say that I sound like a broken record when it comes to relationship. Well, it's because I believe relationships really matter. It's incredibly difficult to go tell somebody, I think what you're doing is having a negative impact on people, without you having the ability to have that relationship with that individual. This is why it becomes so important for you to be able to invest in that. Now, sometimes that's not easy, right? Like, especially if this person is 2 or 3 layers above you. But where I would ask you to think about is, don't start with the person that's 2 or 3 layers above you. Start with your immediate supervisor. Start with this individual that you're having the challenge with. And when there is a specific circumstance, carve the time. And I realize this may sound easier than it is to do, but being able to carve the time and just ask that leader the question, would you mind if I gave you a little bit of feedback? Or would you be open to a little bit of feedback? Here's the thing that's actually really interesting. What you will find, as I'm sure many of you even see, the higher up you go in an organization, the less likely you are to get feedback. There will also be leaders who will say, oh, you know what, I'm open to feedback, give me feedback. But really their actions do not say that they're actually open to feedback. And so what I have often found is, when you are in a situation, when you see the act that creates this challenge appear, to be able to say, hey, Ron, would you be open to a little bit of feedback? It doesn't have to be right now, or if you'd like to kind of get together for a cup of coffee and let's talk about it for a minute. You'd be amazed at how many people actually stop and say, yeah, I'd actually really like that. Nobody's ever offered to me. And then what you actually find, and I realize for some this may seem, well, this is a utopian dream, but what I can tell you from personal experience, an individual that I thought would never be open to feedback, when I asked them the question, would you be open? Again, You're not saying you suck and let me tell you the reasons why. That immediately creates this reaction, right? A biological response that shuts them down and says, you're wrong. But by asking the question, are you open? What I have now done is I have given an incredible amount of power to that individual. Because number one, they can continue to be the jerk and say, no, I don't want to hear feedback, which now only cements your case for why their leadership challenged. And so very few people would go that way, but the individual would then come and say, you know what? I'd actually really appreciate that. Can we grab some time later this afternoon? But if you go, guns blazing and say, this is what you did wrong, you immediately build that wall. So I would encourage you that as you've kind of started to observe this individual, be bold. And sometimes leadership takes courage. The example I shared with you for that individual was that person now looks to me whenever we are in a meeting, and this is an incredibly senior person in our organization, looks to me after the session to say, Thomas, how did I do on X? And the more specific you can be, it opens the door for even more. So be careful. That person may start asking you for more, which is great and a fantastic way to build trust.
Sorry. Yeah, we're at our time. So Pat, do you want to, thank you, Thomas, again, for a great evening. Our well spent was a treat. So Pat, do you want to close out for tonight?
Sure. I'll do that, Lisa. Are you going to do the survey, though? Can you explain that after I just say a few words? I don't know about that part of it. So at any rate, Thomas, really thank you for coming. I personally enjoyed it. The question I liked the best was the one about what walks into the room when you do. I mean, that's really thought-provoking. And I think we could all spend some time on that. I think it was really an excellent talk. I'm taking a course now that's talking about some of these very things. So this was, I can show off and have a few extra things that the rest of the class doesn't have. So thank you so much for coming. I hope some other time you'd be open to coming to talk with us again. I think everybody enjoyed it just looking at the track here. So I also want to thank
if anyone is willing to inflict themselves with that much more pain, I would be honored to come back.
You'd be happy to. Well, thank you so much. And really, we had a very good crowd tonight, good sized crowd. And I want to thank everybody for spending the time to come and listen. And, keep in mind we have, the breakfast meeting coming up, and there's a social hour, let's see, the 17th, I believe. The breakfast meeting is on Saturday. And then the second Thursday of every month, we have the virtual dinner meeting. So we hope to see all of you again. And next month, you can look forward to table topics with the Toastmasters that will really keep those networking discussions moving. I know that they do an excellent job. I've been there before. So Lisa, can you talk a little bit about how to do the Menti survey? And I don't know all the details.
Oh, did you set one up, Pat?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Thomas. So, Thomas, if you want, and we will share the feedback with you afterward. Just let you know, and Lisa will be able to provide that.
That would be very kind, Malin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I love your co-presenter with you. That is outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He is listening, and he said he liked you.
Oh,
you
very
like
good.
Uncle Thomas? Yeah.
I was wondering what walked into the room when he did, which was energy and joy. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Can you help me? Okay, I'll help you.
Thank you.
Pat, do you have a Menti set up?
My phone isn't right here, Lisa. That's why I was asking you. So. We can send out, we have the list. We can send the survey out if you'd like to do that.
Yeah,
It's okay.
Yeah, I don't think I have that. I don't have the Menti set up.
That's okay. No,
For
no
today, yeah.
worries. We'll do that. We'll send that out. Your PDUs for the dinner meeting part of this will be reported by the chapter. And if any of you attended the think tank, we will have for those of you who attended the think tank, we'll let you know what the code was so that you can self-report.
Thank you so much, everyone. Then
Yeah,
let us know
thank
if
you.
you have any questions. Then thank you, Thomas, again, and we're looking forward to see you in 2021. Then we highly encourage everybody who fly American Airlines keep supporting this great airline with leaders like you. Have a great night, everyone.
All right,
Thank
bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe. Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Come, please. Bye. Sorry. Please come. Can you come to say hi to mommy's friend? Yeah. Okay. Can you come to say hi?